Snow doesn't fall in Cedar Hollow. It arrives. It comes down slow and deliberate, like it has somewhere important to be and all the time in the world to get there. That's how Micah Reyes always described it to people who'd never been to the mountains. He said it the way you describe an old friend, someone predictable, someone safe. He didn't know yet that this particular snowfall would change his life. Micah was 26, an illustrator who worked from a cramped apartment above a bakery in Denver, and every December for the last 9 years, he made the 4-hour drive up into the Colorado high country to spend a week at his family's old hunting cabin. It wasn't glamorous. It had one wood stove, plumbing that groaned like an old man getting out of a chair, and a mattress that had seen better decades. But it was his. And every year, he invited the same person, Eli Bennett. They'd been best friends since they were 9 years old, since the day Eli punched a kid twice his size for calling Micah a name on the playground, and then turned around and asked if he wanted to split a juice box like nothing happened. 17 years of friendship. 17 years of Eli being the steadiest thing in Micah's life. Eli was also, as far as Micah and everyone else knew, completely straight. Girlfriends came and went. Eli talked about them the way he talked about football teams, with easy affection and zero permanence. He was broad-shouldered, sandy-haired, the kind of handsome that made waitresses linger a beat too long at the table. He worked construction, had calloused hands and an easy laugh, and had never once, in 17 years, given Micah any reason to think there was more beneath the surface. Which was exactly the problem. Because Micah had known he was gay since he was 14. And he had known he was in love with Eli Bennett since roughly the same year, though it had taken him another 8 to admit that second part to himself in the quiet dark of his own apartment. He'd built a careful, comfortable prison around that feeling. Small enough to live in. Big enough that some days he almost forgot it was there. This year's invitation had been ordinary. A text message, same as always. Cabin trip, December 27th. You in? Eli's reply had come back in under a minute. Wouldn't miss it. Been a rough year, man. Need this. Micah hadn't asked what he meant by rough. He'd find out soon enough. The truck rattled over the switchbacks, heater blasting, radio catching static every time they lost the signal near the ridge line. Eli drove. He always drove, said Micah's old Subaru drove like a golf cart with a grudge, and Micah watched the pines blur past the window, feeling that familiar, dangerous warmth settle into his chest. Being near Eli always felt like standing too close to a fire. Good, until it wasn't. You've been quiet, Eli said, glancing over. You good? Just tired. Work stuff. Micah forced a smile. You said it's been a rough year. What happened? Eli's jaw tightened, just slightly, the kind of thing only someone who'd spent 17 years memorizing his face would notice. Sarah and I split up in October, he said finally. For real this time. Like, papers signed real. Micah blinked. You were engaged. Yeah. Eli's laugh had no humor in it. Turns out you can love someone and still know, deep down, it's not right. Whatever right even means. Something in the way he said it made Micah's pulse stutter. He filed it away. A small, strange thing, easy to dismiss, impossible to forget. I'm sorry, Micah said softly. You didn't tell me. Didn't want to make it a whole thing. Eli's eyes stayed on the road. You're the one person who doesn't ask 100 questions. I just needed somewhere to breathe. My straight best friend shared my bed. Then everything changed, but that moment hadn't happened yet. Right now, it was just 2 friends on a mountain road. One of them carrying a secret so old it had grown roots, the other carrying a wound so fresh it hadn't scarred. Neither of them knew how close those 2 truths were about to collide. The cabin smelled like cedar smoke and dust, exactly the way it always did. Micah got the stove going while Eli hauled in the bags, stomping snow off his boots on the porch. Storm's supposed to get bad tonight, Eli said, checking his phone. Like, snowed in bad. Cell service is already garbage. Cabin stocked. We'll be fine. It was only once the fire caught and the small cabin began to warm that Micah remembered, really remembered, the layout of the place. 1 bedroom, 1 bed, a full size, nothing more. He'd slept on the pull-out couch every year without a second thought. Except this year, the pull-out's frame had finally snapped. He found out when he tried to unfold it, and the whole thing sagged sideways with a metallic groan. 1 leg buckled. Well, Eli said, standing in the doorway, arms crossed, fighting a grin. Guess we're roommates tonight. Micah's stomach did something complicated. You can take the bed. I'll take the floor. Dude, it's below freezing outside and not much warmer in here past midnight. You are not sleeping on a floor next to a dying fire while I hog a whole bed like an idiot. Eli's tone was easy, unbothered. The tone of a man who had never once considered that sharing a bed with his best friend might mean anything at all. That, Micah thought, was the cruelest part. Eli's comfort was total. Untroubled. He could lie down beside Micah and sleep like a stone, because to him, there was nothing here but friendship. Simple, safe, unthreatening. To Micah, it would feel like lying next to the sun and being told not to get burned. Fine, Micah said, voice carefully even. But you snore, so I'm taking the side by the window. Eli laughed, that big, warm laugh that had undone Micah 1,000 times before, and the matter was settled. Snow fell harder as the evening wore on, ticking softly against the window panes. They ate canned chili heated over the stove, played 2 rounds of cards by lamplight, and talked about nothing important. Old teachers, a road trip they'd taken at 19, Eli's little sister's new baby. It was easy. It was always easy with Eli. That was the tragedy of it. By 11, the fire had burned low, and there was nothing left to do but climb under the quilts and face the bed. Micah lay stiff on his side, painfully aware of every inch between them, painfully aware of Eli's weight settling into the mattress, the dip pulling him half an inch closer whether he wanted it or not. Been a long time since we did this, Eli murmured into the dark. Sleepovers, I mean. Feels like being 15 again. Yeah, Micah said. Feels like that. Except at 15, Micah hadn't yet understood why his heart raced every time Eli's arm brushed his in the dark. At 26, he understood completely, and understanding didn't make it any easier to bear. Micah? Yeah? A pause. Long enough that Micah turned his head on the pillow, found Eli already looking at him, sandy hair falling across his forehead, eyes catching the last orange light from the dying stove. Thanks for always having a place for me to land, Eli said quietly. This year especially. You're the only person who's never needed anything from me. You just let me be here. Micah's throat tightened. If you only knew what I need from you, he thought. If you only knew how much. That's what friends are for, he said instead, and the word friends had never tasted so much like a small, quiet grief. Morning brought 4 feet of snow and a driveway buried past the fence line. The truck wasn't going anywhere. Neither was cell service. Well, Eli said, peering out the frosted window with a grin, guess we're stuck. He said it lightly, like an adventure. Micah felt it settle over him like a held breath. Days, maybe, of no escape from proximity, from Eli's laugh across the small kitchen table, from Eli's bare feet padding across the cabin floor in the morning, from another night in that too-small bed. He didn't know yet whether it was a curse or a gift. They spent the day chopping extra firewood from the covered stack, melting snow for water when the pipes groaned and stalled, and reading old paperbacks left behind by Micah's grandfather. Eli read the back covers of 3 different mystery novels aloud in an exaggerated dramatic voice until Micah was laughing too hard to breathe, doubled over the kitchen counter, and Eli was watching him laugh with an expression Micah didn't let himself examine too closely. It was that evening, over the second night's dinner, that Eli went quiet in a different way. Not tired quiet. Thinking quiet. Can I ask you something? He said finally, turning his spoon over in his chili. Always. When did you know? That you were gay, I mean. Was there, like, a moment? Micah's pulse spiked. In 17 years, Eli had never once asked him this. Not out of discomfort, just because it had never seemed to matter to him one way or the other, and Micah had quietly loved him for that too. There wasn't one moment, Micah said carefully. It was more like noticing something had always been true and slowly running out of reasons to pretend it wasn't. Eli nodded slowly, staring into the fire. Yeah, he said, almost to himself. Yeah, that sounds about right. Micah's heart stopped. What do you mean? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Eli didn't answer right away. And in that silence, for feet of snow outside, one dying fire between them, Micah felt the ground under his careful, comfortable prison begin, for the first time in 8 years, to crack. Nothing, Eli said finally, too fast. Forget it. But Micah couldn't forget it. Not that night, lying rigid beside Eli in the dark, listening to his breathing even out into sleep while his own mind raced in frantic circles. Not the next morning, when Eli was unusually quiet over coffee, avoiding his eyes in a way that felt entirely unlike him. By the third snowbound day, the silence between them had grown teeth. "Okay," Micah finally said, setting down his mug hard enough that Eli looked up. "Something's going on with you. You've been weird since last night. Talk to me." Eli ran a hand through his hair, looked at the door, the window, anywhere but Micah. "It's stupid. Try me. I've known you 17 years, Eli. I think I can handle stupid." Eli let out a long breath. When he finally spoke, his voice had none of its usual ease. It came out low and rough and unsteady in a way Micah had never heard before. "The divorce, the split with Sarah, it wasn't just that it wasn't working," Eli said. "It was that I finally let myself admit why it wasn't working. Why it's never really worked, with any of them." Micah went very still. "I've spent my whole adult life," Eli continued, staring hard at the table, "telling myself I was straight because that was easier than looking at what was actually true. And the person I've spent the most time not looking at." He stopped, swallowed. "It's you, Micah. It's always kind of been you." The cabin went silent except for the wind outside and the low crackle of the stove. Micah couldn't speak. 17 years of carefully built walls, and Eli Bennett had just knocked through every one of them with a single unsteady sentence. "Say something," Eli said, voice cracking slightly. "Please. You're kind of freaking me out here." Micah's hands were trembling. "I need you to be sure," he managed. "Because I have loved you since we were 14 years old, Eli." Quietly, carefully, in a box I built specifically so it wouldn't break either of us. "If this is confusion, or loneliness, or the divorce talking, it's not." Eli was around the table now, closer than he'd been all day, close enough that Micah could see the fear and hope tangled together in his eyes. "I've thought about this for months. Maybe years, if I'm honest with myself. I just didn't have the guts to say it out loud until a snowstorm trapped me in a cabin with you, and I ran out of places to hide. You've never," Micah's voice broke, "you've never given me a single sign." 17 years, Eli. "Because I was terrified," Eli said. "Not of you. Of losing you. You're the only person who's ever made me feel like myself, completely, without having to perform anything. I couldn't risk that over something I wasn't even sure was real. And now?" Eli's hand came up, slow, uncertain, and brushed the side of Micah's jaw. The first touch between them in 17 years that wasn't casual, wasn't platonic, wasn't safe. "Now," Eli whispered, "I'm sure." The kiss, when it came, was soft. Careful. Two men unlearning 8 years and 17 years of separate silences in a single breathless moment. Snow falling outside the frosted windows, firelight flickering gold across their faces. When they finally broke apart, Eli rested his forehead against Micah's, both of them breathing unsteadily. "I've been so scared of this," Eli admitted. "Scared of what it means. What people will say. My dad, the guys at work. We don't have to figure all of that out tonight," Micah said softly. "Tonight, we just have to figure out us." That night, the bed felt entirely different. There was no rigid distance, no careful inch of space held like a wall between them. Eli's arm came around Micah's waist, hesitant at first, then settling, like something clicking into a place it had always been meant to be. "Is this okay?" Eli murmured against his hair. "It's more than okay," Micah whispered back, listening to the sound of Eli's heartbeat, steady and close, for the first time in his life, not something to ache over from a distance, but something to simply, quietly, belong to. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and deliberate, like it had somewhere important to be and all the time in the world to get there. They didn't rush anything. Eli was still finding his footing in a truth he'd spent a lifetime avoiding, and Micah, cautious from years of guarding his own heart, wasn't about to let either of them move faster than what felt real. The days that followed the storm were slow and golden in a way neither of them had words for. They cooked together, badly. They argued over card games and made up within minutes. Eli would catch Micah's hand sometimes, just to hold it, like he was testing whether the world would end. It never did. "I keep waiting to feel weird about this," Eli admitted one afternoon, watching Micah sketch by the window, snow light falling pale across the page. "And I don't. I just feel like I finally stopped holding my breath." "That's usually a good sign," Micah said, not looking up, though he was smiling. "Can I ask you something else? You're on a roll this week." Eli huffed a laugh. "Were you ever going to tell me? If none of this happened? If I never said anything?" Micah set his pencil down, considered the honest answer. No, he said finally. I don't think I ever would have. I loved you too much to risk losing you as my best friend. I figured a smaller version of loving you was better than none at all. Eli crossed the room, crouched by his chair, took both his hands. You don't have to settle for a smaller version of anything, ever again, he said. Not with me. The plows finally cleared the road on the 6th day. Neither of them was in a hurry to leave. Once we're back, Eli said, loading the last bag into the truck, this is real. Not cabin real. Actual life real. My family. Your family. People at the site asking why I look like a different person. Micah met his eyes. Are you ready for that? Eli thought about it. Really thought. The way he did everything that mattered. I spent 26 years not ready, he said. I think I'd rather spend the rest of them figuring it out with you than keep being not ready without you. It wasn't a fairy tale answer. It was better, it was honest, imperfect, and entirely Eli. Telling people wasn't instant or easy. Eli's father needed time, quiet time filled with awkward silences before, eventually, a stiff hug at Sunday dinner that meant more than any speech could have. A few of Eli's co-workers had questions, some kinder than others. Eli lost exactly one friend over it and gained, unexpectedly, 3 new ones who'd been quietly hoping he'd figure himself out for years. Micah's mother cried when he told her. Not from sadness, she assured him through the tears, but from years of watching her son carry something heavy and finally seeing him set it down. I always wondered, she admitted, why you never really dated anyone. I thought maybe you just hadn't found the right person. I found him a long time ago, Micah said. It just took a snowstorm to get us both to admit it. The cabin still smelled like cedar smoke and dust. The pull-out couch had finally been replaced. Not that it mattered anymore, since nobody had used it in over a year. Eli built a small addition onto the back porch that winter, said he wanted a proper view of the mountains for mornings. Micah suspected it had more to do with wanting an excuse to work with his hands beside the man he loved, but he never said so out loud. Some things didn't need saying. They sat together on that new porch on their anniversary of the storm, mugs of coffee steaming in the cold, snow falling slow and deliberate outside, like it had somewhere important to be and all the time in the world to get there. Best friend who shared my bed, Micah said, smiling into his mug. That's still the wildest sentence of my whole life. Best friend who shared your bed and never left it, Eli corrected gently, pressing a kiss to his temple. That's the sentence that actually matters. Some love stories start with fireworks. Theirs started with 17 years of quiet devotion, one snowed-in cabin, and the courage, finally, to stop hiding. My straight best friend shared my bed. Then everything changed. It wasn't the storm that changed them. It was the truth they'd both been too afraid to say, until there was nowhere left to hide from it, and no reason left to want to.